Special Investigating Unit is expected to release its interim report in its investigation into alleged multi-million rand corruption at Tembisa Hospital. SIU head advocate Andy Mutibi will lead today's briefing and will then be joined by Health Minister Aaron Motsoaledi, Gauteng MEC Nomantu Ngomoralehok, as well as the Premier for the province, Panyaza Lesufi. Let's speak more about this with DA's Gauteng Shadow Health MEC, Jack Bloom, who joins us now. Jack, if anybody doesn't know your links to the story, they stem far and wide, really having been a whistleblower in many of the cases regarding this, having spoken out prior to any of this happening, even prior to the death, of course, of Babita Deokaran at the time as well. We've finally gotten to a point where we're getting an interim report. Let's get your sense of proceedings thus far for us to have eventually gotten to this point.
Well, we've already heard from the SIU that an amount of more than 2 billion rand is thought to have been stolen from the Tembisa Hospital over a period of 2 years. I mean, this is an incredible amount of money. Imagine if it was spent on the patients instead of being siphoned off to criminal syndicates, because that's what's also been established. And the SIU has already told us that there's 111 officials who have been implicated. And, the DA is going to follow up to ensure that there's disciplinary action at the very least against these officials and also criminal charges. The whole problem so far is, despite the fact that Babita Deokaran was assassinated as the whistleblower behind this whole thing 4 years ago, there's not been a single criminal charge. And we also want to know who's the mastermind behind her assassination. But all these people who crooked these tenders need to be brought to book.
Yeah, and the fear, however, at this point in time is that you've had so many other staff members who have resigned in the time period that we've gotten to here. And of course, you even had the CEO of the Tembisa Hospital at the time, Ashley Mthunzi, who's also now passed away. So does it feel like anybody's going to be able to take accountability or responsibility for a situation like this, since we've had so many years now go by, and it feels as though we're just going to be able to speak about it but have no action?
Give the example of the chief financial officer at the time, who was the one that Babita Deokaran, told about her misgivings about what was going on at Tembisa Hospital. She was placed on full pay on a disciplinary inquiry for 2 years, and just before they were about to sit to conclude the disciplinary inquiry, she was allowed to resign. And this is the sort of laxity that we find in the Gauteng Health Department. They're not prosecuting these disciplinary cases, and the DA believes that the problem starts at the very top. We've called on Premier Lesufi for some time now to dismiss the current MEC for Health and the current head of the Gauteng Health Department, because we feel that they're not pursuing these cases as much as we know, as doggedly as they should be, and that there's a cover-up, quite frankly. So I really hope that this report that we get from the SIU sort of is not dodged, that everything is implemented. We see criminal charges, people appear in court. This can't go on and on like this. It's not just corruption at the Tembisa Hospital. There's other hospitals that are also corrupt, and the problem starts at the top. And so I call on the Premier of this province, change the very top management of this department and your Health MEC, and let's finally start fixing this department and getting rid of the rot that the SIU, I'm sure, is going to tell us in immense detail, and there's still more to come. This is an interim report.
Yeah, and I mean, he's made quite a few changes as the Premier within the province with regards to personnel, but that was the one portfolio that didn't get that change that you had certainly hoped for. Does oversight still work, though, Jack? And I ask that because you blew the whistle on this many times prior to any of this happening, and still we found ourselves in this situation. There were many question marks around tender irregularity and corruption and collusion, etc. Still nothing. Does oversight even work anymore?
Well, it's frustrating, but it has to be done. And unfortunately, the case of Babita Deokaran, she paid with her life. But, we are democracy. I certainly ask questions in the Gauteng legislature. We have a health oversight committee. But at the end of the day, it's the executive authority that has to account. And, that's what elections are all about. But in between elections, we do what we can. And I think people must be very vocal about this. We've got to pressure, certainly, the Premier of this province to step step in. He is going to be at this the release of this SIU, as is the current MEC for Health. So, I think if he can't see the fact that abuses still happen in the Gauteng Health Department because, he's got the same MEC in charge, there's something very wrong. So, look, we must all keep at it. We can't give up.
So you don't expect the minister the premier or even the health MEC, Nomantu Ngomorale Hoka, to act on any of the SIU findings, do you believe? And if they don't, what then?
Well, we'll pressure them as always, but at the end of the day, we have to see criminal charges. We never see criminal charges, and the justice system is so slow. We've got to speed this up. But I do want to commend the SIU because they're very effective with asset forfeitures. So let's go ahead with that. There's criminal masterminds behind it. They think that there's at least 4, if not more, syndicates. You've got people who had all these fake companies, sometimes as many as 20 fake companies. They were siphoning off this money that should have gone to treat patients at Tembisa Hospital. No, let's start. Asset forfeitures, criminal charges, haul them up in court, disciplinary cases, dismiss people. We've got to do everything. We've got to clean up this department.
Yeah, we certainly do. I mean, let's talk about whistleblowers as well here, because that's another element here. We had whistleblowers put forward, Babita Deokaran being a key element of that, and yet there was no security. There was no surety or ability for people like her to actually still feel protected and safe, despite all of that. Are there other major concerns we should be putting forward here on the basis of something like this?
Yes, whistleblower protection. We need to do far more about that and just get an effective detective service and get the police to do their job. None of this would have come out if it wasn't for a reporter called Jeff Wicks, who managed to get the laptop and the cell phone of Babita from her family. But the police had it for a full year and they didn't do anything about it. So we got to get more competent leadership and people in the police. And of course, there's a commission of inquiry now sitting on that various thing. Are there corrupt elements in the police? Are people being protected? We need to know. And just once and for all, we must find out who gave the order to murder Babita Deokaran.
Yeah, some of those tenders that you then worry about. And then there's linkages right through to the Madlanga Commission, of course, and some of the people who are anticipated to be heard from or at least spoken about at that commission too. Your overall assessment, though, of Gauteng Health Department, how dire a state are the procedures, procurement, internal controls, etc., do you think?
It's been a credible estimate that over the last 10 years, about 20 billion rand has been stolen. That's 2 billion rand a year. That's a huge amount of money. And I don't think they've tightened up enough. I think there's still political protection for certain people. The current head of the department was appointed by Premier Lesufi, despite the fact that he himself is being investigated by the SIU for allegedly participating in bribes to influence a tender. Now, how on earth do you appoint a person who's being investigated by the SIU? Now, I asked the Premier about this in the legislature several times, in fact, and the last time was about the status of his lifestyle audit, because the Premier has moved other heads of departments. Why not this head of department? And the Premier said, his lifestyle audit had been extended and they're waiting for the information. It's always wait for this and wait for that. I think that the risk is very high that, in such a case, you remove the head of department and put someone that has the competence and the honesty to clean up that department. But to have a head of department that's being investigated by the SIU is just no go, and I don't know why the Premier hasn't acted on this.
A lot of shielding, it feels like, then, by whether it be political or bureaucratic networks in this case. How deep do you think this goes? Is this just surface level? Does the SIU effectively find out everything and we know everything? Or are there deeper levels that we should be really investigating and trying to understand within not just Gauteng Health, but really throughout the province?
Well, there are deeper levels, and the connections are very high. One of the suspects, and I'm sure we hear more about it, who was involved in these tenders at Tembisa Hospital, is the nephew of President Cyril Ramaphosa from his first marriage. And that's how close the linkages are. And I think that we must, be brave. and fearless, and go to the very top if that's where it has to go, because this political protection must stop. So I think it's encouraging that the Premier's there, the Minister of Health is there, and really act on what the SIU comes up with. I can't stress it enough. We will have findings today. They are interim findings. We'll await a final report, obviously, but after all these years, somebody must be criminally charged. It can't go on with all this people getting off scot-free and long-running disciplinary cases. We must get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, the fear is, however, that despite this SIU report, nothing then gets done. We certainly will be watching it with intent eyes, and Jack Bloom, I believe you'll be doing the same. So we'll hopefully get to speak to you again very soon. The DA's Gauteng Shadow Health MEC, Jack Bloom, as we head